how Microsoft reinvented itself under Satya Nadella. In 2013, Microsoft was losing its identity. The company that once defined personal computing was being outmaneuvered by Apple. Its mobile strategy had collapsed. Its culture was famous for internal battles. And many people believed Microsoft had simply become irrelevant. Then one man became CEO. His name was Satya Nadella. And instead of trying to make Microsoft great again, he completely changed what Microsoft was. Today, we are breaking down how Satya Nadella reinvented Microsoft. Not with one brilliant product. Not with a flashy marketing campaign. But through a series of decisions that transformed the company's culture, business model, and future. And if you're building a business, Microsoft's story contains a lesson worth paying attention to. Because this is the story of what happens when a successful company realizes that the world it dominated is disappearing. The company that was too successful to change. For decades, Microsoft was one of the most powerful companies on earth. Windows was everywhere. Office was everywhere. And for millions of people, using a computer basically meant using Microsoft products. The business model was simple. Microsoft created the software. People bought computers. Those computers ran Windows. Businesses bought Office. And Microsoft collected billions from an ecosystem that seemed almost impossible to challenge. But success creates a dangerous problem. It teaches you what worked yesterday. And eventually, you start defending the past instead of building the future. By the early 2010s, the world was changing rapidly. People were moving from desktop computers to smartphones. Software was moving to the cloud. Apple had the iPhone. Google had Android. Amazon was building a massive cloud business. And Microsoft? It was still heavily associated with Windows. The company was still incredibly profitable. But its most important business was tied to a world that was changing. And that creates one of the hardest challenges in business. How do you reinvent a successful company without destroying what made it successful? That was the problem Satya Nadella inherited in 2014. Reinvention starts with culture. When Nadella became CEO, many people expected a revolutionary new product. Maybe a new phone. Maybe a new version of Windows. Maybe a major acquisition. But his first major transformation wasn't technological. It was cultural. Because Nadella understood something many business leaders learned too late. A company doesn't move at the speed of its strategy. It moves at the speed of its people. Microsoft had developed a reputation for intense internal competition. Teams fought for resources. Executives competed internally. Different divisions often behaved less like one company, and more like rival companies sharing the same logo. Instead of asking, what's best for the customer? People could end up asking, which team gets credit? Who gets the budget? Who wins? That kind of culture can make a company slow. So Nadella pushed Microsoft toward a different mindset. A growth mindset. The belief that people and organizations are not fixed. You don't have to be the company you were yesterday. You can learn. You can adapt. You can change. The shift was simple. From being a company that already knew everything, to becoming a company that was willing to learn. And this is an important lesson for entrepreneurs. Your biggest advantage may not be knowing more than everyone else. It may be being willing to learn faster than everyone else. Because the market doesn't care how successful you were 5 years ago. It only cares whether you can solve today's problem. Microsoft stopped protecting Windows. But changing the culture was only the beginning. Microsoft still had a much bigger problem. Its entire business model was built around selling software. And the future was moving somewhere else. For years, Windows was Microsoft's center of gravity. The logic was obvious. If you want Microsoft software, you use Windows. If you want Microsoft tools, you buy a Windows computer. But then the world changed. People began using iPhones, Android phones, MacBooks, tablets, cloud-based software. The old strategy was becoming a trap. Microsoft could either protect Windows or reach the billions of people who were no longer using Windows. Nadella chose the second option. Microsoft began putting more of its software on competing platforms. Office became available on devices that weren't made by Microsoft. Microsoft services became increasingly accessible through the web. And instead of asking, "How do we force people to use Windows?" the company started asking, "How do we make Microsoft useful wherever people already are?" That was a massive strategic shift. Because sometimes, the biggest obstacle to growth is your own business model. Customers don't necessarily care about Windows. They care about getting work done. They care about collaboration. They care about storing files. They care about solving problems. So Microsoft gradually shifted its focus from, "You need our platform," to, "You need our tools." And that opened the door to a much larger opportunity. Because if your product only works inside your ecosystem, your market is limited by the size of your ecosystem. But if your product works everywhere, the entire world becomes your potential market. Sometimes, growth requires you to stop protecting the thing that made you successful. The product that helped you build your business may eventually become the thing limiting your business. The smartest companies recognize that before it's too late. The cloud bet that changed everything. And that brings us to the most important part of Microsoft's transformation. The cloud. For decades, Microsoft made money through a traditional model. You bought software. You installed it. And eventually, you bought the next version. But technology was moving toward something different. Instead of buying software once, customers could pay for services continuously. Instead of storing everything on your own computer, data could live on remote servers. And businesses could rent computing power whenever they needed it. This was the world of cloud computing. And Microsoft's cloud platform was called Azure. But there was a problem. Microsoft did not enter the cloud market first. Amazon was already there with AWS. And AWS had a significant head start. But Microsoft had something Amazon didn't have. Millions of businesses already depended on Microsoft. They used Windows, Office, enterprise software, business databases, developer tools. Microsoft already had relationships with some of the largest organizations in the world. So the strategy became simple. If businesses are already using Microsoft everywhere else, why not make the cloud the place where all of it connects? This is a powerful business lesson. Sometimes you don't win by inventing something completely new. Sometimes you win by connecting things better than anyone else. Microsoft already had the assets. Its enterprise relationships. Its software. Its developers. Its infrastructure. Nadella's job was to make those assets more valuable together. And slowly, Microsoft transformed itself from a company selling software into a company providing the infrastructure that other companies depended on. A startup could use Microsoft Cloud Services. A global bank could use Microsoft Cloud Services. A government agency could use Microsoft Cloud Services. The customer no longer needed to buy one box of software. They could become deeply integrated into an entire ecosystem. And the more services they used, the more valuable the ecosystem became. Microsoft wasn't just selling products anymore. It was becoming infrastructure. The company that once fought open source. But Microsoft still had another problem. For years, the company and the open source world were often seen as opponents. Microsoft was built around proprietary software. Its business depended heavily on controlling its ecosystem. But under Nadella, that philosophy began to change. Microsoft became much more friendly toward open source developers. It invested heavily in tools for programmers. And it acquired GitHub. Why was this important? Because developers are incredibly valuable. Developers decide which tools businesses use. They decide which platforms companies build on. They influence the future before the average customer even knows that future exists. Microsoft realized that winning developers was not about forcing them to use Windows. It was about giving them tools they actually wanted to use. This was another example of the same philosophy. Stop asking, "How do we control the customer?" Start asking, "How do we become useful to the customer?" Because control creates resistance. Value creates loyalty. And Microsoft was becoming increasingly focused on value. Microsoft was becoming something new. By this point, Microsoft had changed its culture, its business model, its relationship with developers, and its entire view of the technology industry. If you're enjoying this breakdown, take a second to hit the like button. It helps the video reach more entrepreneurs and business builders. And if you want more breakdowns of the strategies behind the world's biggest companies, subscribe. Because Microsoft's transformation wasn't finished yet. Buying the future. One of the biggest decisions under Nadella was Microsoft's aggressive approach to acquisitions. The company didn't just buy businesses because they were profitable. It often bought companies because they represented where the future was going. LinkedIn gave Microsoft access to a massive professional network. GitHub gave it a deeper relationship with developers. And its gaming business gave it a huge entertainment ecosystem. Each acquisition gave Microsoft something different. But the bigger strategy was the same. Find where people are going. Then build a position before the destination becomes obvious. This is a lesson that applies to much smaller businesses too. You don't always need to build everything yourself. Sometimes the smartest move is to find a technology you don't have, an audience you can't reach, a capability you need, or a company that already solved a problem you would spend years trying to solve. Then ask, can we create more value together than separately? That's what strategic reinvention often looks like. Not throwing everything away, but combining existing strengths in a way that creates something new, the RE moment. And eventually, Microsoft found itself at the center of one of the biggest technological shifts in history. Artificial intelligence. When AI began rapidly entering the mainstream, Microsoft was already in a strong position. It had cloud infrastructure, enterprise customers, developers, productivity software, and a massive global distribution network. The question was no longer, can Microsoft survive the next technology revolution? It was, can Microsoft become the platform that distributes it? That distinction is everything. Because the most powerful companies are often not the ones that invent every major technology. They are the ones that make that technology useful to millions of people. And suddenly, Microsoft's transformation made sense. The company had spent years building the infrastructure required for the next wave. The cloud. The developer ecosystem. The enterprise relationships. The productivity software. The global distribution. Microsoft was no longer simply a company selling operating systems. It had become something much bigger. A platform. A network. An infrastructure provider. A productivity company. An enterprise technology company. And increasingly, an AI company. Nadella did not reinvent Microsoft by pretending its past never happened. He used the company's past as a foundation. Then he changed what that foundation was used for. The final takeaway. Microsoft's reinvention under Satya Nadella wasn't really about one new product. It was about changing the company's answer to one simple question. What does the world need from us now? That question transformed Microsoft from a company defending its past into a company building the future. And for any entrepreneur, that's the lesson worth remembering. The future rarely belongs to the company that refuses to change. It belongs to the company that changes before it has to. And if you want to see how another technology company built an almost impossible advantage in one of the world's most important industries, watch this video next. How one company quietly took control of the AI revolution. Because sometimes, the most powerful companies aren't the ones everyone is talking about. They're the ones quietly becoming impossible to replace.